Nick, thank you for joining us. Today, we're very lucky to have Nick Bruining. He is Starts at 60's finance expert, and he's joining us to help us just dissect a little bit more the 2024 budget. Obviously, Nick, we've had a couple of days to kind of delve a little deeper and look at, there's the initial news that comes out with no doubt a little bit of PR spin and polish on it. And then, we have a bit of time to look into it more deeply. So I guess what everyone in the Starts at 60 community is really keen to hear is, what really is going to be good for the over 60s out of this year's budget announcement.
Well, Wendy, apart from more legs than the Titanic at 3 o'clock in the morning before the budget, we did get some announcements that we weren't expecting on the budget night. And look, probably the biggest takeaway is the thing that really is kicking a big problem for the government past the next election, and that's the freezing on these things called deeming rates. Now, for anyone that doesn't understand deeming, it's very complicated, but worth understanding to understand the significance of what they've announced. So when Centrelink look at the income you're getting from your investments, they don't actually care how much you're earning. So if you're getting 6 or 7% on a bank account, good luck to you. Centrelink don't care. They don't even assess the dividends you get from your shares or the money you receive from your account-based pensions and withdrawals from supers. Everyone went, what? Exactly. They use this thing called the deeming system. And basically what they do is they pile all of your financial investments, imagine putting it into one big pot, okay? So we're talking about money in the bank, cash, bullion, shares, superannuation assets if you're over 67, and all of your account-based pensions. It all goes into this one big pot. And what Centrelink do is they deem that it's earning a certain rate of interest. So for singles, for example, currently, the first $60,400 is deemed to be earning 0.25%. 0.25%, think about that. Everything above 60,400 is deemed to be earning 2.25%. And if you're a couple, that magic threshold where it shifts from 0.25 to 2.25 is $100,200 combined. Now you're thinking, well, that's an incredibly low rate, and it is. And it all stems back to the heart of the pandemic, because at the time, the now opposition, then government said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to lower the deeming rates to reflect the current overnight cash rate, which had been dumped because of the pandemic to stimulate the economy. And you were lucky to get 1% on your savings, a couple of years ago. So they froze these deeming rates. And in the lead up to the election, they said, we're going to freeze them until 2024. And guess what? The opposition, which is now the government, said, we're going to do exactly the same. So they've created this big problem. After the pandemic, interest rates start shooting up and everyone's going, you beauty, thank you very much. And of course, these deeming rates have been frozen. Now, we all expected the deeming rates to be lifted back to normal by 1st of July this year. But this is the big announcement from the government on budget night. They've said, no, we're going to freeze it for another 12 months, which basically, as I say, kicks the problem down the road. Now, here's the thing, Wendy. When those deeming rates were set at 0.25 and 2.25, the overnight cash rate was about 0.5%. It's now 4.35%. That's the sort of the number that the Reserve Bank uses. 4.35%. Now, the last time was at 4.35%. Those deeming rates weren't 0.25 and 2.25. They were 4 and 6%. So just imagine if they lifted lifted back to 4 and 6%. What you'd see is thousands of our Starts at 60 fans getting their pensions clipped by as much as $200 or $300 a fortnight in some cases if you had something like $300,000 in savings. So it was a huge problem. So this freezing means it's been pushed down the road. But guess what? This ain't going to happen beyond next year. We'll be past the election. Whoever wins will have 3 years to deal with any issues. There's no doubt in my mind that those deeming rates will come off. One other group that's also affected by this, those are people with a Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare card. Now, this is the card you get when you don't qualify for a pension because you've got too much in assets. There's an income test, which is very complicated. It basically takes in all of your taxable income that you get from, and this is a bit different to not the other way Centrelink assess things. They actually look at the interest you're getting from your bank accounts. And they look at the share dividends and all that sort of stuff. But in the case of account-based pensions, they'll use that deeming system for account-based pensions. Now, what's the bottom line? If you're lucky enough to have $1.5 million in an account-based pension fund, good luck to you. But your deemed income off the account-based pension, if it was returned to normal, would be something like about $88,000. That's only $6,000 or $7,000 under the $95,000 where you get kicked off altogether with this Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. So again, down the track, not a problem now, but something to think about next year. Now, one final point on the deeming rates. This is a way you can thrash the Centrelink system, okay? Because Centrelink are only deeming you to be earning 2.25%. You'd have to be a nut to be receiving 2.25%. You can easily get 4 or 5% if you shop around a little bit. In fact, you can get 5.7% on a 4-month introductory basis from some of these online accounts for the first $250,000 you've got to invest. That 5.7% versus Centrelink saying you're earning 2.25. You're basically, with a couple of $100,000, you're beating the system by $6,000 a year. So absolutely shop around. It starts at 60 with great resources to look at, what sort of rates and things are on offer from different places. But do shop around because you can beat the system for at least the next 16 months or so.
Great. Look, that's great advice because people want to know. Essentially, people love a tip on how to beat the system, right? That's
exactly. But it is a head spin, Wendy.
Yeah. And look, I think what we need to do, Nick, is we need to book in a session with you in the lead up to when the deeming rates, aren't going to be frozen anymore,
definitely.
so that people can kind of go, well, what should we do in preparation for that? So let's make sure that we make sure we come back to that later. But
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. And, by the way, I love interviewing you because I don't need to ask many questions. You just talk and talk and talk, which is great. So, and I'm sure our audience is loving it as well with all of your tips and tricks. So we know then that, it's definitely going to make a difference to finances of older Australians with that whole deeming rate conversation. What about the cost of living measures that they've put out? Are those real? Do you think they are going to have a knock-on effect to the hip pocket now?
Wendy, I think that, when you boil it down, how many pensioners, how many of our starts at 60 fans pay tax? Very little. I mean, that's one of the other things that comes about from those changes to the tax rates. At the moment, I don't think our fans would know this, but a single person can earn $33,000 as a retiree and not pay any tax anyway. So $33,000 as a single and don't pay tax. Couples is around about $28,000 each and they don't pay tax. Now, as a result of these new tax rates kicking in on the 1st of July, that'll actually lift up to about $35,000 for singles. So again, we'll put it in starts at 60 in the next couple of weeks, but that'll be the new threshold that you can earn. Anything below that, you pay zero tax. You don't even have to put in a tax return. And then above that, for couples, it's likely to be about $30,000. So you'll be able to earn about $60,000 before you pay tax. The magical $300 energy payment, well, yeah, I guess, great, $75. Will it make a huge difference? Probably not, but, who's going to knock it back? It's going to arrive in quarters, so I suspect conveniently one of your $75 payments might arrive the Friday before the election. Who knows? But, not being a cynic, but you need to look at these things. And look, the other thing... Well,
then you can afford your democracy sausage then.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, just go for plain beef. You don't want any of those flash things. They'll probably cost you a bit more. But look, you're quite right. But the other thing that's in the budget is a lot of stuff that's NFP, not for publication. And that's telling you that the government's stashing a nice solid little war chest aside so that in the lead up to the election, I'm sure there'll be a few more sweeteners. Wendy, the government on both, parties on both sides understand the power of the silver-haired devils, us, right? Because they know the influence we actually have on our kids and grandkids about some of those sort of outcomes. And I can tell you that Bill Shorten many years ago, when he thought about getting rid of franking credits, was acutely aware of that effect when everyone was sitting around at Christmas dinner saying, looks like we're going to have to sell the shares because you're not going to get the franking credits. What? And suddenly they're seeing their inheritances disappearing. So fortunately, we silver-haired devils do have some voting power, if you like, and the government's quite aware of it.
Yeah, no, the Starts at 60 community is very important.
Hey, I'll tell you one other thing which is good, and that's for someone, any of our fans that are on prescription drugs. So we're not talking about, natural medicine therapies, those sort. These are what's called pharmaceutical benefit scheme, PBS listed drugs. Now, currently, if you've got a concession card, so we're talking about the pension concession card, the low income healthcare card, and of course the Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare card, you only pay $7.70 per prescription until $277.20 for the year is reached, which is about 36 scripts, and then you don't pay any more. The good news is that thing normally goes up by inflation on the 1st of January each year. They're freezing it until 2030. So it'll be $7.70 per script, capped at $277.20 until you get to 2030. So that's actually quite a saving, and particularly for people on all sorts of different pills and shaking around like a maraca every morning. Yes. That's going to save them quite a bit of money.
Yeah. And I think certainly from what we're seeing in the conversations that our community is having online, that is definitely one of the areas that is a welcome announcement, because let's face it, you get to a certain age and you are on a beautiful little concoction of pills sometimes.
Well, I mean, the other way to look at it is if you're super healthy and not on any pills and you're off grid running on batteries for the power system, you're going to get nothing out of this budget because you don't get. You're only saving money if you spend it. Mm.
Yes, true. That is a very interesting point. But I think that most of us are in that spending bucket rather than not. Certainly, from what I'm seeing with the community chatting online. So we mentioned the medicine. What were your thoughts around the aged care quality conversation?
Oh, look, there's another interesting thing, which is, they're terrified of the next federal election. So for the last couple of years, the government's been doing a lot of work in the aged care sector, and particularly looking at how it's being funded at the moment. I mean, that's a whole other session, to be honest, Wendy, talking about how DAPs and RADs and all those things work. But look, the bottom line is this, that the government said, again, we're going to kick the can on all these aged care changes down the road until next year, until 2025 is the commencement date. But guess what? There's no legislation yet. So we have no idea what the new regime looks like as far as fees and charges are concerned. There's almost certain we're going to see a situation where if you're getting a home care package, at the moment, there's no real compulsion to pay your contribution of $11 a day or thereabouts. I reckon there'll be some changes to that where they'll say, you know what, you're going to have to pay your share of it, as well as what the government kicks in if you're on a home care package. For aged care places, they've announced another 2,000 or 4,000 or so. Back again, 4,000 additional packages for home care. Again, while wacko, that just reflects the natural growth in it. There was a time when you were waiting up to 12 months to get a home care package. Those wait times are way down now. They're sort of 3 to 6 months. So, it's not a question of being assessed and bang, suddenly you've got your package, but it's certainly a lot quicker. So, you would have to see and you would expect to see a lift quite regularly simply because more of us are getting older. Look, but nonetheless, as I say, watch this space because we'll see legislation not before the election is announced and held. I suspect it'll be after the election. But look, for all of our Starts at 60 fans, it does say to me, you need to think a bit about how you're going to fund aged care. I mean, we'd all like to go out horizontally in a pine box from our house, but the reality is that many of us won't be in that situation, and we'll need to move into care, and we'll need to have some shekels behind us that we might need to use for that. But more on that, we cover all of that, of course, in Starts at 60.
Yes, and maybe we add that to our list of things we need to chat with down the chat, Nick. I think
I'll have to get my little sheet to start jotting all these down.
So on this topic, with the budget conversation, do you have any thoughts, Nick, just to wrap it all up? Do you have any thoughts on any areas that the budget fell short for the over 60s?
I think short of information. Look, I think we would all like to see clarification on where those aged care costs will be. I think that's an important one. It's nice that these are temporary measures. I think the government is under some pressure to have a look at those working bonus systems. Now, again, just to explain briefly, if you decide to go back and do a bit of part-time work, the government gives you a free $300 a fortnight that you can earn before you lose part of your pension. And when you go over that $300, effectively, plus the other income test of $204, bottom line is they end up losing 50 cents of their pension for every dollar. It's like a tax, Wendy. And so seniors are saying, wouldn't it be good if we lifted the amount that a senior could earn before they start to lose the pension? And that would solve our problems of skill shortage. We've got, thousands of our fans who are so good at what they did when they were working, loyal, more loyal than some of these young people that seem to, flip jobs as soon as someone offers them a pay rise. Fantastic workers, but, what's the incentive to go back to work when you're going to have half your pension clipped? So those sorts of things I think people would have liked to have seen. Possibly a bit more towards energy. I know a lot of our fans are looking at sort of alternative. There was talk about, rebates for batteries and all this sort of stuff. None of that's come through. So, yeah, watch this space. It'll all be about the election, and I reckon we'll start. We'll probably need another chat, I don't know, February, March next year when it's all out there. We can start to say, this is good, this is bad. But anyway, that's the good thing about this industry, isn't it, Wendy? There's always change. There's always reasons to come back to the website to see what has changed.
Exactly. All right, well, let's pencil in a few more conversations, Nick, because you've been great today. Thank you so much. I'm sure the community appreciates your wisdom, and I certainly appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks.
Nick, thank